Hey, everybody, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Monday, the 30th of September. Today, I'd like to share with you a devotion from Forward Day by Day with today's devotion. And the scripture it's using is Genesis 28:15a. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. And the author says this: When I left California after 17 years to return to my hometown near Washington, D.C., I drove cross country alone. I was cautious, of course. I pre-planned 3 overnight stays with friends along the way. I stuck to my route and timed it so I wouldn't drive at night. Everything went off without a hitch. As we make our way through life, we often move from one place to the next, to a new city or a familiar town. We make our plans and plan our course. Sometimes the journey is smooth and at other times rocky, but God is always with us. With that blessed assurance, we can arrive at the new place with a sense of thanksgiving for safe travels and anticipation of what is to come. On Friday, for Feel Good Friday, I talked about what it was to be loved and being known by God, and that sense of God knows who we are. I think it was Friday. Today, we're talking about this idea that God is with us, that we can arrive at a new place with a sense of thanksgiving for safe travels and anticipation of what is to come, because God is always with us, that God is always aware of us and knows our journey, our path. And that is such an important thing to remember. I know that for many people it feels like you're doing things by yourself, or it's just you and me against the world, the old Helen Reddy song. And it feels like, you might be just pulling through this life, dragging all your stuff with you, looking around saying, is there no one there to help? The truth is that God is always with you. Now, God doesn't usually, manifest God's self in a way that says, here, I'm going to pick this up and carry it for you. But God, I think, does manifest God's self in things like those people that the author stopped at their home at the end of each day for 3 nights and gave them hospitality, gave the author the chance to have a good sleep and probably a good meal and a breakfast in the morning, and people that they could relax with and chat about the drive and be. God God is not going to simply, like 99.999 times out of 100, God is not simply going to just swoop in and with some miracle scoop away all the problems in our lives. But God knows us well enough to know when we need help and when we can't do it on our own, and when sometimes we need to. And if we're open and we're aware and we're willing to pay attention to the very places that we need things, or that those times when we need someone, we might be able to see and hear God saying to us, here I am. It could be in the stranger when you're driving along and you stop for coffee who asks you, how's your day's been going? Are you having a good drive on the road? Or somebody comes in and says, well, before you get back on the road, be aware because there's not a bathroom for the 200 kilometers. You better get gas. Those kinds of things that we maybe take for granted, the things that we think are just coincidence, the things we don't notice, but when we look back, we realize, I wonder, was that the hand of God? Each of us, every single day, has many opportunities where we can recognize that God has been with us, that God has joined us for a meal, that God has been a signpost on the journey. But we need to be aware of that intentionally. We need to be more open to recognizing that God is present, even in the most ludicrous, unexpected ways. I remember a time when I had been at a cathedral service in London, in Ontario, I don't know, synod or something, and I was sitting on a park bench with a gentleman. I might have told the story to you before if you've been around for a while. And he was hungry. He wasn't homeless, but he was looking a little like in need of something. So I ran back in the church and came out with like a napkin filled with cookies and brownies and stuff like that, and a glass of juice or punch. And I sat on the bench on the grounds of the cathedral, and we sat and talked. And he shared with me that he had just been released from prison, and he was staying at a home run by, I believe it was the John Howard Society, but he didn't have any friends and he didn't know other people, and he was nervous. He didn't want to go back to jail. He didn't want to do something wrong, but he wanted to know that somebody out there cared for him. And so we talked for a long time and we prayed together. And that was long before I got good at praying. Well, I'm not still good at it now, but I'm much more comfortable with having to pray extemporaneously. I certainly couldn't then, not well. But I did. And the gift of that evening reminded me that God was with me. Looking back on that now, I know that God was present beside me. And I believe that God was present beside that person because I was there. Not only does God take opportunity to be with us through other people, but God takes opportunity to be with others through us. And that is an incredible gift, one that we should never, ever take lightly, and one that we should never take for granted, one that we should actively try to offer, to allow ourselves to be gifts, a presence for God to use us, to be present in us for other people. Can you imagine what it would be like if everyone invited God to work through them to reach out to someone else? The world would be a very different place, wouldn't it? Have a great day. God bless, and I will see you again tomorrow, Tuesday, for Church at Home with Rachel.